Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday to you, Monday morning, Monday evening, Sunday night, wherever you may be. I guess it's not Sunday night anywhere at the moment. Early Monday morning if you're checking in from America or Canada or Latin America. Another on-time start as usual. Sorry for that. Really trying to get 9 a.m. London time. I'll get back to it. It's summer, right? Couple charts today we haven't looked at in a while. Let's do some Bitcoin analysis. This is my favorite one. All right, the old percentile bands on the US dollar run against the power curve. Okay. I pulled this in just a second ago to the model, a little under 119,000. I know we puked a little bit last night from getting close to 120,000, but is what it is. Remember, every time we're above this line, we pull it up. Okay, so it's very positive for the future of Bitcoin when the price is above the trend line. Where are we exactly? Let's look at the ones where you have trouble reading. And again, I got to work on my colors, but here's the 50th and the 60th percentiles. Which historically, all right, have meant around 0.8 to 0.9x the trend. Okay, obviously we're above that. Let's go to the 70th percentile. Now we're right on it. All right. And remember, 70th percentile is kind of like 1 sigma. It's 2/3 of the time. Although it's even a little bit lower than 1 sigma technically, because remember, 1 sigma is going to be up above the trend and then under the trend. So it's actually lower than 1 sigma. It's pretty much in normal range. But it just shows you that this number, the 70% number, if we just focus on that for a second, you know, 70% of the time the price is going to be under this multiple, all right, which is 1.1x the trend. So it's not that crazy. All right, all of the boom, silly season, fun times have been above the 70th percentile, but most of the time, 70% of the time, Bitcoin is under where we are today. So when I have to start saying in these videos, most of the time, the price is completely under where we are today, that would mean the price is, say, somewhere here above the 90th percentile, and we're just not there yet. Plenty of room. But again, as I said a lot in the last couple of days, this can definitely come quick. Days, weeks, really. When it runs up from, say, the 70th to the 90th, it can come very, very quick. All right, so I want to look at gold now in terms of the same chart. Okay, so it gives us a little bit of a different flavor to where store of value money is perceived in the market. All right, so dollar is it is a store of value, the dollar, but it's a relatively poor store of value, as is every other currency, which is usually worse than the dollar, right? But if we triangulate and we look at Bitcoin versus gold, and the easiest way to do that is still looking at the dollar price of each and just triangulating. I'm not finding a market here. of gold, Bitcoin, right? We get a different picture. Okay, we see the same general understanding of the the booms here in 2011, 2013, then 17, then 2021, the double. But notice here, in terms of gold, we're under trend. Okay, this makes perfect sense when you think about the fact that gold is at all-time highs, $3,300 per ounce and more. But it gives us a different flavor for how Bitcoin can sort of react in the marketplace. It's the same great R squared, 95% R squared. Remember, for the power trend itself, we're rounding to 96% now. Okay. But in the dollar versus the dollar, we're right at trend. Right at trend. With gold, we're under trend. And I'm not exactly sure how high this one will go during the bull. I think this is very interesting because remember, during basically the entire life of Bitcoin here, gold was moving sideways. It went down right after the global financial crisis in dollar terms, right? It went up here in 2011 during the midst of the Eurozone crisis. So here you see it very low as far the Bitcoin price, right? It's very, very low, rounding to zero. This is ounces of gold per Bitcoin, right? To be clear, this is ounces of gold per Bitcoin. Okay, ounces right there. So really, it was only here where gold itself was really flying high versus the dollar versus Bitcoin until today. So that's why everything looks very similar to the old Bitcoin price chart that we know most people understand, except for today. So it'll be interesting to see when this next cycle plays out how relative strength gold can hold against Bitcoin. It's still an incredible number to think about. In the last 15 years, one Bitcoin went from being 0 ounces of gold to now, on a price, 35 ounces of gold, and the trend is 60. 60 ounces of gold per one Bitcoin is the trend, is the power trend. So, again, presuming the same trend, and I'm not saying it will play out this way where we peak out again, right? Just like we did in prior booms in dollar terms, we peak out in gold terms. Because again, gold is booming right now. Over the last 2 years, central banks are buying more. It will be interesting to see what it peaks out at. But relative to gold, we could say, relative to the trend of where Bitcoin typically is, Bitcoin is a little bit undervalued in terms of gold. We can say that based on what we see. So how undervalued? Let's look at the 50th percentile now. Again, I know it's not great arrows for you, or colors. It's right around the 50th percentile, the current price. Okay, 36 ounces of gold per one Bitcoin. If I go to the 60th, that's 43. So 20% difference from current price. Something to think about. Let's look back again how relatively easily Bitcoin has pumped above the 60th percentile for gold. All right. Pretty easy. It's very close to the trend line itself. When Bitcoin pumps in dollar terms, it's typically pumped in gold terms. So this is a just a different way to look at store value money. Something to keep an eye on. So if I put back the 90th percentile, all right, we still hit it in each prior cycle. Okay, but unlike in dollar terms, where the double top hit, twice, we hit the double top basically. We hit each top in 2021. In gold terms, we did not, only hit the first one. And now, if you look at, again, where gold's price is, around 35 ounces of gold per Bitcoin, or Bitcoin's price in terms of gold, getting up to the 90th percentile, or about 1.9x the trend, is 112 ounces of gold per Bitcoin. It's a big, it's just crazy figures if you think about it. Again, I've been trying to promote what I'm doing here is basically all the content you could get for an expensive newsletter, an old gold bug newsletter back in the day, but now in real time and free. I've read many newsletters over the years where people are talking about, getting up to 100 ounces of gold. You can store 100 ounces of gold in a paint can in your garage or in your basement. People will never know. One Bitcoin now is 35 ounces. And getting to, the trend that it has in each prior cycle would get you to that 100 ounces of gold. So Peter Schiff has disastrously led all of his followers, clients, out of Bitcoin into gold. He's getting a little bit of a payday now, just a little bit in dollar terms, all right, in dollar terms. But remember, in Bitcoin terms, it's just still terrible. All right, what was it? What did it top out in 2021? It was about the current price. That is Bitcoin in terms of gold, 35 ounces of gold per Bitcoin. And then went all the way down to 9. But still, it's back up to the 2021 high at the moment. But a long way from reaching an all-time high in terms of percentile, being up at around the 90th percentile level. So we got time. And I'm not saying it will hit the 90th percentile. I just don't know the future. But based on what's happened in the past, never financial advice, but past can be prologue. So I think it's an interesting metric to come back to, especially since, gold has been hovering around its all-time high for a while now. And in the last 2 years, gold has, run pretty strong from under $2,000 an ounce to where it is today. I can't tell you how many Bitcoin faux experts that I've spoken to over the years from Wall Street that have poo-pooed Bitcoin, sometimes poo-pooing Bitcoin while keeping gold as a positive benchmark. They have all been wrong. That's why I keep saying the trend is your friend if you just look at the trend lines, keep steady hands, you're typically going to be rewarded. Right? I haven't even done this math, but let's look how long the current trend takes to go up an ounce, right? So just the trend, not anything, just the trend. So if we're at 61 here in August 2025, let's see when it gets to 62. Right? A month. A month. All right, which makes sense, right? $100 a day, 3,000 a month. $100 a day is the current trend in dollar terms. So roughly, again, when we went from 60, even faster than a month, August 10th, 11th went to 61, and August 30th, August 30th went to 62. So 20 days. Bitcoin at the moment on a trend increases its value by an ounce of gold every 20 days. Now we're off that trend. Clearly, we're off it. We're well off it. I told you we're at the 50th. So let's look at how much it takes from roughly around where we are today to go from. Let's start anew. So 37 started August 12th. All right, let's see when it goes to 38. A little bit longer, a month. So we're on a trend right now where we're on this number 5. We're not on the black line. We're on the number 5 line, the 50th percentile. And that trend will increase an additional ounce of gold per Bitcoin in a month. And you really have to look. That's why I love, showing these charts, is that we can look in, okay, you can follow any trend line analysis. Bitcoin's pumping over the next day, 1,001 YouTube thumbnails to show you that. Or you just look at the long-term trend based on the power curve, and you see that we're always hovering around it. It's not, sometimes we may be well over it, sometimes well under it, but it really is an amazing trend, I think, for building confidence in the asset and confidence for your family to hold it. Good evening, Tim. Hope your Monday was very good. And I do think, which I've talked about before at length, I do think there will be a role for a long time for gold still. Again, nothing, even if Bitcoin, as much as I love the Bitcoin memes, it's just, there's never going to be one night where Bitcoin, it's infinity over 21 million. It's going to take time. You got to skate to where the puck is moving. And there probably will be, a role for gold for a while, even if it's in jewelry form, of course. I measure all that, right? I showed that on Friday. We're about $20 trillion worth of gold still. So Bitcoin can, even when Bitcoin gets to 20 trillion, presumably, gold will even be higher then, right? Because it's growing at an exponential rate of 6-7% per year. So I would just take confidence in the trend lines and the way things grow, because that's the way it's worked in the past. Might work differently in the future when we talk about this power curve versus exponential curves, which we'll get more into. But so far, everything continues to grow. Gold is more valuable than it was 15 years ago when Bitcoin started. So is well, let me caveat that, more valuable in terms of greater dollars per ounce. Of course, that doesn't mean that you have a real return. For that, you need to look at the cost of living in your life, your country, which is way arbitrary of a calculation. I don't intend to do that much on this channel, as I've talked about. I do like to look at the money supply growth, but it's still a different thing. So anyway, they're all going to grow. But interestingly, we can say that Bitcoin in terms of gold is a little bit undervalued relative to the trend and relative to the dollar. Okay, because the dollar, we're right on trend. We're at fair value. But if you're a, brass tacks, simply, if you're a gold / Bitcoin investor, you would rotate out of Bitcoin here into gold, and you would rotate out of gold into Bitcoin at the bottoms, right? And we are not at a bottom, but at a relatively low number. Remember, the bottom would be about 10 percentile. So we're higher than that. But theoretically, if you are a gold / Bitcoin investor, you can still accrete or revolve into bigger Bitcoin gains by moving into Bitcoin in this bull market. But it will be interesting because I do not know how the excess interest in gold right now might reflect the top on this chart. Maybe we don't even get to 90%, the 90th percentile as a range. Another one I wanted to show was the old market cap per payment. All right, so remember, payments are a subset of transactions. It includes all batched transactions that people make. Remember, you can pay many people in one transaction with some decent wallet software, and exchanges do this all the time. I think I probably need to just show every chart as far as the 10th percentiles because they're the most helpful, just running them all back. This I still have my sort of old setup with sigmas, but again, it's not a huge difference, but we're bumping up on the. So to explain this chart again, if you look at the bumps, again, the typical bumps in price, which would also give these bumps in the market cap per payment, we're trying to find an overvaluation, right, based on the underlying economics of the payments of Bitcoin. It's not measuring what the payments themselves are in UTXOs or dollar terms or anything. It's just market cap per payment and running the trend line. So still a pretty good trend, 88% R squared. And we're definitely above trend. Prior tops, for example, just look at 2021, have hit this blue line, but not the red line. So, and been consistently above the blue line. We have not done that here, although we're starting. So, although we're back down again. The market cap per payment there, you see it's $2 million, which relative to the trend is on the high side, above trend, but it's not in nosebleed territory. I am still working on the UTXO HODL waves and stuff. I've never put them into this software, and I'm doing it all myself for the moment, which anybody can do, by the way. I mean, it's, running a node. I've run a few different nodes in my past, but trying to get sort of an analytical node, anybody can do that as well. A lot of these charting software services cost a lot of money that I don't necessarily want to pay. So I'm trying to pull it all into my own setup and share it with you guys. But Yeah, I'm working on it. So we'll get some more UTXO hodl type waves coming up. And I also want to get the MicroStrategy as a power curve. I know I've promised that last week. I just don't have it ready yet. It's most of what I wanted to show here. If you guys want to look at some other charts, let me know. Again, stoicism. Peter Schiff should just despise this chart. He was poo-pooing all here when Bitcoin rounded to 0 ounces of gold per Bitcoin. I think it was somewhere in 2016. No, it was 2017 when we got to an ounce. Right, so let's find when we got to 1 ounce per one. It's right there. March, first time. So I think the price was around 3,000. No, gold wouldn't have been that way. It was like 1,700 probably at that moment, something like that. That's what gold probably was for a long time right there. So $1,700 worth for one Bitcoin, $1,700 worth per an ounce of gold. And Bitcoin has not looked back. Yes, yes, Tim. I want to get a good chart of a calculator of these different things. Probably not in kilos because most of the stuff, they don't. It is true that in tons, the World Gold Council does put a lot of stuff in tons, but I try to put everything back into ounces because I think it's just easiest. That's the way the market price is. But you can use that for some other interesting metrics, like back in the day, the dollar used to be 371 grains of silver. It's like 80% of an ounce. You can kind of do some interesting calculations of like, okay, well, how much was that then? How much would that be today in dollar terms or gold ounce terms? Good morning, Martin. Good morning. Happy coffee to you. So it's back to the gold thing. It's 200,000 tons, something like that have been mined ever of gold, which if you work out the math on what is possibly lost through industrial or continuously recycled through industrial versus what is in bullion and jewelry, you're something like 7 billion ounces total mined, and then back it down to like 6.1 billion ounces available. The word I use is available gold. I have it on my website actually. If people want to look, it's nothing too fancy, but probably need to split this up because there's so many different charts on one page. But there's gold, 1.2 billion in central banks at the moment. That's that $4 trillion worth. 1.5 billion in private bullion, so Perth Mint and places like that Peter Schiff likes. ETF holdings are going to be in here. But a very small sliver, by the way, like very, very small, is actually in tradable ETFs. It's kind of interesting to note. Jewelry, 3.1 billion ounces, and then a billion in sort of industrial loss to sort of constant churn. It's 14% basically of the total. There's your gold. Silver, nothing in central banks, very small amount in actual bullion. Jewelry and silverware, and then 50% industrial loss. And then with Bitcoin, I don't have it again because I lost my API, but I'm making it again. We can do the UTXO tranches or the HODL tranches, and we can see, how much how much Bitcoin has been moved in the last day, week, month, year, etc. So I want to get more of that. That's a good valuation metric that I need to show for you guys. That all the typical outfits like Glassnode and Coinmetrics they provide, but this is how it looks in dollar terms: gold, silver, and Bitcoin. So gold all time, 23 trillion. That's if you sort of include even industrial gold. But the number that I use for most of my analysis is this, 19.6 trillion. Then the jewelry, 10. Bullion, 9. You see it split 50-50. Gold and central banks, 4. Bitcoin, 2.36. And then Bitcoin is larger than all the silver cuts, whether it's all time, 2.3 trillion. Available, which subtracts out industrial, 1.2 trillion. Jewelry, 1 trillion of that, which is huge. And then bullion, which is a very small sliver of silver, 160 billion. And there is a little bit of silver that is in some central banks, but it's like super small. It's, you know, maybe 100 million or something dollars worth of silver. So you can see that. Got the stock market data as well. I'm going to get more there. Bitcoin's number 5, passed back up above Google over the weekend and recently. Relatively low volume day, only 60 billion. Usually you can get up to 100 billion these days. Anyway, let me know, guys, if you want to look at another chart. Slightly political one for my European friends. Here's a Ukraine chart. Europe continues to donate more, as they should. 155 billion, according to the Kiel Institute at the moment. Cumulative, US 115 billion. Nothing like 300 billion, like some people have said, but these are drones attacked on Ukraine. I think the attack number is actually higher because I've heard, there have been nights where they've had 700 drones. This is, I think, perhaps shot down. It's still an enormous number. You see here, daily drones, 324, July 9th. These are really crazy weeks here, the people we're dealing with. But I mean, you look at this chart, it's not going down. It's just not going down. Their casualties are, though, slightly. Russian casualties, over 1 million. And they continue to, my understanding is the front is 60, 70, 80% activity of drones now. There are intense fighting, of course, in some of these key cities, but there's a few kilometers on the front that is just drones are going to swarm. So it's unbelievably dystopian, and everybody's learning from what's happening there. Still holding about the same 20% of Ukraine, so it's 9.5 Russians per square kilometer is what they're operating at. It's pretty morbid. But I was pleased to, report for those that care and appreciate those that do. There was finally some movement from those protests last week. Let's pull it up from Twitter. Let's find some good movement. I mean, not finally. It was pretty quickly. But it's, as I talked about, it was a lot of European people were not feeling good about these protests. And here's JP Lindsley, who I had on. Great American journalist who's trying to reach out to people on the right, people that are conservative in the U.S. But I think the bottom line is these two anti-corruption agencies, which Europe said have to remain independent. Zelensky wanted to bring them under the presidential administration to get them moving quicker, according to him. And the Ukrainian youth was protesting that. And it's a wonderful thing to see. I mean, when the country is at war, like, they really do care about democracy and the rule of law. It's kind of the thing I keep coming back to. I know most of you guys here probably agree, but when the Americans wake up, there's a lot of people on the hard right that don't agree. But we can talk all we want about anarcho-capitalist, totally free societies. I would rather focus on free societies and the free world, all they have done for people, versus countries like Russia, North Korea, China, that are not embracing those values at all. It's hard to imagine there's going to be a start date or an end date to some of this. But that's where we are. And it was good to see that things are going to change now with this law that was going through. They're going to rework a bill precisely because of the protests in Ukraine. So it was heartening to see. Anyway, I continue to be perhaps the only person that swings between Bitcoin and free market money in Ukraine, so let me know. Good morning, Sandro. Yeah. Of course, the EU continues to just be a socialist, blood-sucking entity. It's very difficult for people to get behind. Yeah, it is morbid. Europeans continue to go on vacation as Ukrainians continue to have increasing drone attacks. And like I said, there's even more here. I think this is shot down because I know that there are 700. There are nights when there were 700. And that's not registering here, but this is from the Ministry of Defense. And the Germans said, I believe, Sandro, that they expect Russia plans to launch 2,000 drones a night. Iranian designed drones. Yeah. They've been pretty clear that they're not trying to take this back. They're just trying to, Ukraine's ready to stop the war and just call these frozen territories politically. I mean, just like it's going to be a North Korea situation. Both sides are not really going to recognize the other's demands, but hopefully sometime in the future, it could be long in the future, there's some reunification, like in East or West Germany. One thing I heard interesting recently was the Germans never gave up. Well, I'll come back to that. Let me respond to you, Tim. So yeah, I don't think. I mean that. I wouldn't look at this chart as a sign that Ukraine plans to take back those territories anytime soon. Although the people are suffering, and that 20,000 children figure has been revised up to 35,000 now. Illegally deported children, and then the children that live in the occupied territories as well are being brainwashed and radicalized to fight for Russia. But I would turn this on its head and just look at it from the Russian perspective. Like this is the great Russian Empire. And thank God they're so incompetent, but you know, Ukraine continues to wear them down. So that's the perspective I would look at, not from trying to retake the same territory, which is going to be frozen for a long time. But I heard an interesting fact about Kaliningrad, Königsberg. So the Germans, after World War II, never gave up on their territories officially. So that would include the Baltic Germans all the way up to, to my country, into Latvia. I guess it wouldn't include all of that because, of course, the Baltics had, in Lithuania's case, had re-independence in 1918 from the Russian Empire and kept all those, older medieval territories, and any German territory was renounced after World War One. But they did have, of course, the core of Old Prussia, Königsberg, through northern Poland. And after World War II, the capitulation, the Russians moved in, raped a bunch of German women. Something like 2 million, I think, was the estimates. And most Germans were forced to leave on foot, mass migration. But I didn't know that it was never given up even in the reinstitution of the German state, never gave up on those territories. It was like an open question. It's like what Ukraine would have here. It was an open question. And it was finally settled in 1990, 91, 92, when Germany had their reunification. And then, of course, Soviet Union was ending, but it was not ending yet. And that was one of the things the Germans agreed to, was just to forego any further claim on Königsberg, which I wish they didn't. But so it's just funny to me that Kaliningrad, which is I've never been, but I assume is just as much of a shithole as most other Imperial Russian operated places. They have no history in that part of the world, but they keep that. And then they act like Ukraine, which is clearly better managed than Russia, somehow belongs to them. So there's only one country here that's rewriting Ukraine accepted the borders, Poland, Lithuania, Germany, all accepted these borders post 1991. And the German claim was a really long claim. I did not know that they kept that from World War II. And then there's one country that keeps one revising. That's all I got today, guys. If you, yeah, hi, Samuel. Yes, that's just the crazy thing. I mean, it's just, and they're very poor at, at managing the land they have. I posted this. I'm going to continue to update it because they're coming after us. Maybe you saw, but so there's a great Ukrainian author. Read all his books if you haven't. Like really interesting books, even about Saudi Arabia. Really interesting author Ukrainian, Yaroslav Trofimov, and he reposted this from MFA Russia saying, we should be thankful for the Soviet investments and subsidies since the Baltics were illegally occupied. And so I put a couple charts up here. Our GDP per capita doubled. Consumption, which is usually a typical measure of wealth, which is the consumption component of GDP, is triple. Family values, abortions, they are top in the world, Russia. But even this is a funny one. This is sanitation service. So like toilets, basically working toilets. I'd always heard as 1 in 5 Russians didn't have a toilet. WHO says it's more like 2 in 5. 60% do, 40% don't. Baltics, of course, close to 100. And this one, I mean, why don't you just fix your own country? You have so much land, and you don't. This thing about safely treated domestic wastewater flows. It's some environmental indicator. They're just like bottom in the world. Glenn Greenwald says it's a border dispute, even though Putin said many times that all of Ukraine is ours. When a Russian soldier's boot steps, there's an ancient parable. It's an ancient proverb. In that sense, Ukraine is ours. Yeah. Europe as a whole, though, it's sad that they're not rallying. And like I said, the Germans one that always follow the Ordnung, follow the procedures, and we know that Russia will just piss all over that. Sorry, my language, but anyway, for those that I haven't lost after the switch from Bitcoin to Ukraine charts, we can go back if you want. There's a crazy thing, another one too, by the way. This hump here, this is if you take all the casualties, which are over 1 million now, and you just divide them cumulatively, they just keep grinding away. And this is not exactly a military budget, but this is, at the moment, Ukraine, via its benefactors that have paid money in, which has been roughly 260 billion, 270 billion euros. That works itself out to 257,000 euros per Russian casualty, which is not necessarily a death, but a MIA, whatever. But I think you could take that number and see how much of a buffer on the other side. I'm not saying Russia has the money for that, but it costs Ukraine that much to stop them. And even more, these numbers you can see haven't been up. I mean, the United States has not contributed this quarter, but from April, I don't have Europe's numbers updated either. So it's even more or less per capita. And no, at some point that's going to become too expensive for Russia on the other side, but it's not. They don't seem to be at that point yet. They're paying, these people to come fight for, on sort of a mercenary basis, like money that you would never see relative to the purchasing power of that little village that this person lives in, like, $50,000 worth or $100,000 worth of all in for families to contribute. And there's a lot of warning signs. They don't have that in the budget yet anymore. But so far, they're still paying it. But on the cost side, it's costing Ukraine $257,000 per soldier. It's become more efficient. It's a morbid way to say it, I know, but it was costing $1 million at the beginning. I don't know. It's just a disaster, but they continue to fight for us. Should I go back to gold? Summer months, I guess it's a lull for markets and things, but I expect this to get back up above the blue line pretty consistently, just because it's happened in all the prior booms, and it can happen quick. So again, market cap per payment on the Bitcoin network. Thank you, Sandra. You as well. I haven't seen Geo recently. I wanted to ask him about Romania, because probably before us, it's going to be Moldova that is going to suffer or be challenged significantly from Russia. I mean, they're already being challenged. And, it's Romanian people, basically. Curious if there's anything happening there. The Ukraine, the latest team, great podcast, as I know many people have watched following me. They did some really interesting interviews with some Moldovan politicians last week, so I'd recommend those if people want to check it out. But we got time with gold, guys. We got time. If you're a gold investor still thinking you want to get into Bitcoin, you are at a proper time. Let's see where we are exactly. It's 50th, right? Yeah, 50th. So we're literally at the 50% level at 35 ounces of gold per Bitcoin. Which is unbelievable relative to the trend. Bitcoin has been at this price 50% of the time. It's just itself crazy, but that's still a deal compared to the dollar, which we're now at 70% of the time. So it's a little bit hot. But stay calm. As always, stay calm. That's my message. Nothing happening yet. And I will try to very soon I really want, before this next bull, I want to get the volume of, a lot of the new Wall Street players, the ETFs, the publicly traded miners now, the Bitcoin treasury companies. It's a lot of new data coming in, which should be helpful for us as this bull continues. So I think, guys, I will leave it there. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you tomorrow.